Senator DeFrancisco.
Yes, we're on the resolution. I don't know if you have any speakers or we could call for the vote.
We are on the resolution. The first speaker is Senator Liz Krueger.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm sorry you don't have a lovely green dress like the last president.
How's the green tie, though?
Oh, it is green. It looks gray from here. Thank you. If the sponsor would please yield for some questions.
Senator Young, do you yield? Senator yields.
Thank you. So, Senator Young, we sat through 95 hours, I think, of budget hearings. And so I'm looking at your budget, your one-house budget proposal, and your financial plan that was given to me today. Can you explain what funds were cut and avails taken to total $979 million cuts from the governor's proposed budget?
Well, thank you very much, Senator Krueger. And through you, Mr. President, I'd like to actually thank Senator Krueger because she was there, as was I, for all 95 hours of those hearings. And I also want to compliment our colleagues because so many of our colleagues showed up to raise very significant, very important issues in regards to the governor's budget proposal. As Senator Flanagan pointed out, it has been an extraordinarily transparent process as we've gone through this journey. And I also want to point out, I know that there was a concern about middle-class New Yorkers. As Senator Flanagan stated, under our higher education plan, we have significant measures that would help middle-class New Yorkers. But on top of that, in our tax relief plan that we put forward, there is significant relief, 25 by 25, and what that means is the middle income tax rate would be reduced by 25% by the year, and that is actually taking it down to an historic level, and so I want to point those out. As far as Senator Krueger's question, and by the way, we are adhering to the 2% voluntary spending cap. This body has been extraordinarily responsible from a fiscal standpoint, very accountable, where we've actually spent less than 2%. This budget proposal that we are putting forward right now increases state operating funds by 1.9%, which is under the cap. The state operating fund spending is $96.2 billion, and the way that's broken out, $258 million increase from the executive recommendation of $95.9 billion, a $1.9 billion increase from fiscal year 2016, which is 1.98%, and all fund spending is at $155.1 billion, an increase of 1.96%. So our package encourages job growth, provides tax relief, and invests in education. As far as the question by Senator Krueger, you're just wondering how we've been able to do that. We actually have done reestimates in personal services base. The governor overstates spending on salaries and fringe benefits. And so, for example, and I have it right here. The reestimates include $35 million from retirement vacancy savings, the executive book savings from retirements on a full annual basis, when in reality people retire at different times during the year. We were smoothing that out. And as I said, $300 million from a personal services spending-based reestimate. In our reckoning, the executive overstates spending projections on personal services by overstating the average salary of employees that work for the executive-controlled agencies and uses that as a base to inflate overall personal services and general state charges projections in the financial plan. So those are just two examples of how we're able to achieve that.
Through you, Mr. President, the sponsor would continue to yield.
Certainly.
Sponsor yields.
So again, your plan cuts $979 million from general fund cuts and avails. You also cut $928 million from capital funds. but at the same time, in your resolution, you show significant increases over multiple years in capital monies and expenses. So I guess try to shorthand, would a 5-year plan, in fact, be able to stay within the target you proposed that you were doing this year, which is to stay within the 2%?
Yes.
Okay. Through you, Mr. President, if the sponsor would continue to yield.
Yes.
Sponsor
Thank you.
yields.
So, Mr. President, the reason that I am so concerned that the numbers don't appear to add up when you look at the budget resolution and you look at the financial plan is because of the history in the state. Between 1996 and 2008, under Pataki and then Bruno and Skelos, the state budget grew nearly 100% from $62 billion to $121 billion. In that same time period, the state debt grew from $31 billion to $54 billion, causing the debt load attributable for each man, woman, and child in New York to almost double. Today, we are looking at a one-house budget bill. Well, we're actually looking at a resolution, and the resolution doesn't necessarily match the language in the one-house budget bill that tells us we're going to be able to reduce taxes dramatically, which we would all love to hear, but apparently increase spending. So it seems to me that means we either are raising our borrowing or something isn't quite adding up, which is one of the things that is triggering my concern here. So if I may, through you, Mr. President, this budget proposal being brought before us today, how much would be the reduced state contributions towards the city of New York and its budget? What's the cut to New York City's budget in this one-house budget bill?
Thank you, Mr. President, through you. Maybe my colleague doesn't realize this, just as part of an answer to the statement that you just made. Capital spending is excluded from state operations. And again, I would like to stress that this House has been extraordinarily fiscally prudent over the past few years. We have kept spending of state operations under the 2% cap voluntarily. And also, if my colleague wants to talk about history, we could talk about 2009 and 10 when they were in control of this House and taxes were increased by $14 billion. Spending was increased by $14 billion at a time when the economy was tanking and New Yorkers could least afford those types of irresponsible policies. However, we are adding up the answer to the question, and the answer is $867 million.
For you, Mr. President, if the sponsor would continue to yield.
Certainly.
Sponsor yields.
Thank you. This one-house budget bill also proposes a cap of 2% on the New York City property tax law. How much would that cost the city of New York per year or even over the next 4 years?
As Senator, through you, Mr. President, as Senator Kruger may know, there is a crisis in New York State as far as the tax burden goes. And it actually has exacerbated the affordable housing crunch that we see. The taxes are too high in New York City, and as a result, it has dampened, in many cases, economic growth. It's really created some problems. We believe that the city actually has been raising taxes by gaming the system, by changing assessments. And it's created this heavy, heavy burden on middle-class New Yorkers who may own their own homes, but at the same time on businesses that operate in New York City. The 2% property tax cap would be the beginning of bringing more of a responsible approach to taxation in New York City. Frankly, the entire structure needs to be overhauled, but this could be a good beginning.
Through you, Mr. President, I'm going to speak on the bill for now simply because there are so many of my colleagues who have issues to raise, and I don't want to use up too much of the time. Perhaps I can come back at the end with some additional questions. I want to thank my colleague for her answers. Again,
Senator Kruger on the bill.
thank you. There are things you can like in any given one-house bill, but there's too many things to dislike here. My colleague's proposal that somehow putting a cap on property taxes for New York City will address the assessment problem will not. In fact, there is an assessment issue. There's a fundamental problem with how property taxes are calculated throughout the state of New York that I think does require full reform. But just for the record, simply applying a 2% property tax cap in New York City, which is not, by the way, suffering from the same property tax prices as much of the state of New York, would lose the city of New York an estimated $8.4 billion in revenue over the next 4 years. The proposal that my colleagues have put forth today would, as suggested, reduce the state revenue to the city of New York by approximately $800 to $900 million this year, but growing exponentially in the years following. We are proposing in this budget to radically change gambling law in New York State. I heard Senator Flanagan say we should have hearings on marital control. I don't think hearings are a bad idea ever. I certainly think before we allow online poker or that we allow fantasy gaming before a court case is even decided to suddenly become legal in the state of New York, we ought to have hearings about that rather than slide that in through a budget bill when most New Yorkers don't even know that that's what we are being proposing today. I think that the proposal on paid family leave should be exceptionally scrutinized because while if you read the text of the bill, we are accepting the paid family leave proposal of the governor, but when you read the resolution, there's a big however right there in print. The program should also be evaluated for benefit level, duration of program goals, how long you might have to work before you were eligible, how long you might be eligible when there's an interplay with federal non-paid medical leave, what the sustainability is, what the phase-in should be. For the record, I don't think this is paid family leave the way most people think it's being proposed by the governor, my conference, the other house. The same is true with minimum wage. There is a reference to exploring minimum wage, but no proposal to actually concretely see an increase for the millions of New Yorkers who would be moved out of poverty and on their way towards living wages for themselves and their families with an actual living wage bill. There are specific cuts to higher education that I know some of my other colleagues are going to speak about. I just want to go on record right here, Mr. President. The language in the resolution says that because CUNY has had a few anti-Semitic incidents, we should cut funding for higher education for 500,000 students in the city of New York. Well, none of us endorse anti-Semitism, racism, attacks on anyone for gender, sex, race, religion, anywhere. Unfortunately, we live in a society where those incidents occasionally happen everywhere. Can you imagine saying we're going to cut our funding to higher education because any specific university had an incident? We'd pretty much not be able to fund any school system, any university system. And so it's exceptionally disturbing that that argument was being made here today. While we all are delighted to see an increase in public education K through 12, again, in the absence of seeing the funding runs per district, my understanding is the proposal being raised in this one House bill would actually reduce the formula for high needs districts in the basic educational funding formula. That's completely unacceptable. I've received a note saying I'm out of time. I'm not out of things to talk about, but I am out of time, Mr. President. Thank you very much.
It's good to know that you are in town, Senator Kruger. Senator Peralta.
I don't know how many times I have to get up and say deja vu on this floor.
Senator Peralta, do you want to speak on the bill?
On the bill, Mr.
Senator
President.
Peralta on the bill.
Thank you. This is deja vu, Mr. President. Another year has passed, and here we go again. We stand here today debating our one-house budget resolution, and again, a vital increase in New York's minimum wage is missing from the text. Again, no DREAM Act, but today I'm going to focus my remarks on minimum wage because I'm pretty sure I'll get another opportunity to discuss DREAM since this is a one-house resolution. We must act now. For too many years, we have continued to kick this can down the road. Don't get me wrong. We've taken a step forward on this issue in the past, bringing the state's minimum wage up to $9 an hour as of this year. But that's the problem here. It's just a step. And while we can continue to take our baby steps on this issue, low-wage workers in New York continue to face economic hardships that destroy not only their own health and welfare, but also that of their families. I commend Governor Cuomo for his leadership on the fight for the $15 an hour as part of his budget season. While many are quick to criticize the utility of a $15 minimum wage in New York, it should be noted that if a 1970s minimum wage were modified based on inflation, today's minimum wage would be just about that amount. I understand that my Senate Republican colleagues are looking for more information on minimum wage, so let me give you some. Official reports indicate that about 730,000 New Yorkers are earning wages at or below the current minimum wage of $9 an hour. As much as the rhetoric dictates otherwise, this is not just a New York City issue. For instance, over 32,000 New Yorkers in the Department of Labor's Central New York region are living at this income rate, and over 61,000 in the Department of Labor's Western New York region are doing the same. What does living on the minimum wage mean for New Yorkers? Well, it's a bleak picture across the state. It is estimated that statewide, the typical minimum wage worker earns under $16,000 a year. Erratic and inconsistent work schedules are pervasive in these jobs, making the ability to secure a second line of income impossible in many cases. $16,000 a year means individual workers are often at or near official poverty guidelines throughout the state. And in fact, last year's Fast Food Wage Board determined that 60% of the state's minimum wage fast food workers receive some sort of public assistance. This is compared to 25% across all of New York's working families. This isn't simply unjust from the standpoint of being rewarded for hard work. It's also absurd from a fiscal perspective. The negative effect of the current minimum wage on the state's resource is crystal clear. The minimum wage also fails to meet financial self-sufficiency standards that are set by our own Department of Labor. Take the family of two living in Senator DeFrancisco's district, for instance. The Department of Labor estimates that the family would need to earn $33,000 a year to get by without help. Similarly, let's take the same family in Senator Young's district, which would need $31,974 to do the same. So clearly, $16,000 doesn't come close to cutting it, especially when one member of that family, that two-person family, is a child who clearly isn't part of the workforce. Well-compensated workers are also stronger consumers in our state's economy. It is common sense that a discount store employee should be able to afford a necessary item of clothing within their employer's own inventory, and that a supermarket cashier should similarly be able to afford a healthy meal. This is just good business for employers. The anecdotal evidence on this is also clear. Take the story of the low-wage earning mother who testified before the Wage Board last year that she and her infants were forced to share a tightly packed apartment with strangers. Or take the story of the low-wage earning man who wakes up every morning at 7 a.m. to head to his first job, only to nap for a few hours before heading to his second, and that sometimes starts at midnight. Some would call him lucky to even have two jobs. Frankly, I call the need for this insanity. Research presented to last year's Wage Board also concluded that the current minimum wage is taking its toll on low-wage workers physically and emotionally, leading to overcrowded, unsafe living spaces, heavy debt, the inability to cover necessities such as heat and light, lack of sleep and exhaustion, depression, homelessness, inadequate nutrition intake, living in crime-ridden neighborhoods, the inability to afford or attend higher education opportunities, physical ailments such as shortened life expectancy, hypertension, diabetes, obesity, and chronic stress. We can and we must do better than this for all New Yorkers. I encourage my colleagues to reconsider their stance on the fight for 15. It is beyond time to bring this workable, livable minimum wage to our great state. Stats show that raising this wage to $15 would directly benefit 2.3 million people working in New York. This is a quarter of the state's entire workforce. Now, this is real progress. And finally, I will note that the workers to be affected by this increase, 80% of them are over the age of 25 in the city of New York, and 70% of them are over the age of 25 in upstate New York. Now, that's a fact. In closing, I encourage all of us here to do the right thing, to do the fiscally smart thing, and to do it now. Let's raise the statewide minimum wage to $15 an hour and continue to set New York forward as a national standard bearer and economic leader it has always been. And let's not even get me started on DREAM. Because although you have increased income eligibility from $80,000 to $100,000 a year for middle-class New Yorkers, this resolution creates a fund of $60 million a year for scholarship awards for students who attend SUNY who have a household income eligibility of over $100,000 a year. But there's no language on who qualifies for these scholarships. There's no language on who chooses these students. There's no language on how much is doled out to each individual student, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you can find $60 million for scholarships for well-to-do households instead of helping dreamers or households making under $100,000, which are the bulk of these students. But you can't find money for those individuals that need it the most. So for this and so many other reasons, I'm going to be voting in the negative, Mr. President. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Peralta. Senator Stavisky.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a number of questions if there would somebody be kind enough to yield.
Senator Young. Senator Young yields.
To start with, the Republican budget resolution accepts the 30% shift in CUNY costs to the city of New York. Can you explain the reasoning behind that?
Yes, thank you very much, Senator, for that question. Through you, Mr. President, the 30% figure was determined because the mayor of the city of New York currently, and has for quite a while, had the ability to appoint 30% of the Board of Trustees for the CUNY system.
Would the senator continue to yield?
Senator
Yes.
yields.
That was not spelled out in your budget resolution in Part C. There were some other issues that are spelled out in Part C. Would you care to discuss the other reasons for the
That's
shift?
part of it. I mean, that's, if you're asking where we came up with a 30% figure, that's where we came up with that 30% figure. However, you are correct. There have been several very egregious incidents that have occurred on CUNY campuses, anti-Semitic instances, and I can go through those if you'd like. I have a list right here. The feeling is that the CUNY system has not done enough to address those incidents, and we would like to see them corrected.
Would the senator continue to yield?
Would you like for me to read some of them?
No.
Okay.
Well, all right. No, not necessary. I think we're all familiar with what happened at
Senator
the CUNY
Stavisky,
campus.
do you want to ask a question?
I was asked whether I wanted to hear the list, and my answer was no. That I would appreciate if the senator would continue to yield.
Senator yields.
Certainly.
Are you aware that the Anti-Defamation League, which is considered the preeminent organization, the world's leading opponent of anti-Semitism, on March 4th of this year, sent a letter to the City University of New York and to the Chancellor Milliken and thanked them for taking steps to renew allegations of anti-Semitism on several of its campuses and for establishing a task force for more understanding and respectful environment. Are you familiar with that?
We did, through you, Mr. President, we did receive a letter on late Friday from the Anti-Defamation League. However, we still feel that the action that has been taken isn't strong enough, and it was done very late, and we just got that letter. But, I mean, if you want to go through a list, this list is horrifying as to what has been happening on those campuses. And it's not only happened to the students who feel unsafe, by the way, it actually has happened to some of the faculty. And I believe that the CUNY system has a responsibility, number one, to keep its students safe, and number two, it should support its faculty and staff.
Will the Senator continue to yield?
Certainly.
Senator yields.
Are you familiar with the Academic Engagement Network that sent a letter to the Chancellor on March 7th, thanking them for what they have done in confronting this ugly issue of anti-Semitism?
Again, that just came to us. It came at the same time as the letter, and so we're reviewing that. But again, these are significant issues that have to be addressed.
Would the Senator continue to yield?
Certainly.
Senator yields.
There's a lengthy article from Truth Revolt, the 10 worst anti-Semitic campuses in the country. And unfortunately, 3 of them are in New York State: Columbia University, Cornell University, and Vassar. And the things that were written about are just as egregious as what happened on the CUNY campuses. For example, at Vassar, apparently there was a posting an anti-Semitic German cartoon dating from the Nazi regime on their Twitter account, and Vassar, the Students for a Just Palestine, vandalized a pro-Israel wall of truth and harassed students taking a course involving a trip to Israel to study water supply issues. And it goes on. There are incidents at a number of campuses, unfortunately 3 in New York State. Are you familiar with that?
No, but, Senator, we would not condone any kind of racist activity anywhere. I would like to ask, however, what is the group Truth Revolt? I've never heard of them. So who is behind them?
Well, let me finish a follow-up on the question I was asking. Is any Bundy aid being restricted from these private colleges for anti-Semitic occurrences?
No.
Would the Senator continue to yield?
But again, that's not the only formulation that we used as far as the CUNY system goes. And by the way, this is the governor's proposal, and I would like to clarify too. So this proposal on CUNY is actually to deal with operating aid. The colleges and universities that you reference actually don't receive operating aid from New York State government. They do receive Bundy aid, but it's a totally different funding stream.
Would the Senator continue
Except for Cornell,
yeah,
which I would like to say that's a land grant college, which I'm very familiar with as former agriculture chair in the Senate. So I would clarify that.
Would the Senator continue to yield?
Senator Young, you yield.
I'm glad you mentioned Cornell,
yields.
because it's a wonderful institution, particularly the statutory colleges.
I think you visited there, right?
My father was an alumnus
Okay,
of the
very
College
good.
of Agriculture. which is why I care so much about the university. I've been there many times. But the point, I think, and what I would like the Senate to respond to, is the fact that despite Cornell's SJP chapter used open force to intimidate Jewish and pro-Israel students on campus, they've erected mock checkpoints, etc. Despite that fact, could you explain the $4 million increase in funding to Cornell?